as when we eat chocolate. This is one of the things I love, the idea that cooperation is right in there with the great pleasures of life, you know. And we also know that empathy, that babies cry at the sound of other babies crying, but not necessarily at the sound of their own voice. So we're tuned in from the earliest age to that. So really then the question is, what is it that keeps us from expressing those natural qualities? So my case that I make even more explicitly in this book is that we really don't need to be better people. We're good enough, you know? And the question is, why isn't that goodness? Why isn't that cooperation and sense of fairness showing up more? Because none of us would say, oh yeah, we want this world where, do you know that half the children now in America will spend some portion of their childhood on food stamps? Half the children in America.
Half the children.
Yes. So nobody wants a rich country where children are that deprived, that they have to have that kind of insecurity in their lives. And so that's really the question. Why aren't these good qualities showing up? That's the question I try to answer.
Absolutely. And now, Francis, in Getting a Grip, you do respond to Eric Fromm's contention in the anatomy of human destructiveness.
Yes.
That there may be what some psychologists, perhaps incorrectly, have called a death instinct that propels human beings to do destructive things. And your work, both in Getting a Grip and also as a frame at the foundational premise of all your project, contends that destructive instinct, that, as a matter of fact, in concert with greed and competitiveness, might have been unjustly imposed on us as human beings, as if we're not capable of transcending it.
Well, what I take from Eric Fromm, and I use in virtually every speech I give now, I owe such a debt to that gentleman. But what he taught me, there's one line in The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness that just stopped me in my tracks. He writes, "It is man's humanity that makes him so inhuman."
Yes.
And what he then goes on to describe is our unique capacity to create what he calls frames of orientation, and I call a mental map or a frame.
Yes.
That we then see the world literally through a lens, and that tells us what we can see and what we cannot see. In other words, if we really believe that we are selfish and competitive and materialistic and mean-spirited, then that's what we'll see out there, and that's what we will become. And I had this very mundane, sort of homey example of this on Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Thanksgiving morning, I was going to make root vegetables in a big Dutch oven.
That's right.
So I searched all through the kitchen and in the basement, and I was so frustrated I couldn't find my Dutch oven. And then I gave up. And a few minutes later, I turned around, and there it was. But I turned it into a flower pot. So I didn't recognize it because I was thinking a kitchen dish, and actually it was right there. It was red. It was very visible, but it had been remade into something else. So it was a different category, so I didn't recognize it. So if we don't recognize that we have these pro-social qualities, these beautiful built-in joy of cooperation and empathy and need to be effective and have power and all of these things, then we won't see them. Just like I didn't see my Dutch oven that morning because I had it in a different category than what it was in that moment. Does that make sense?
Of course.
It's a very homey kind of example of the frame.
It makes the point.
But I think that, so he's saying that all this framing that we do is all well and good if the frames that we have are really aligned with life, if they really serve life. But right now, you and I are alive in this moment in time when our dominant idea about ourselves is badly aligned with life itself, with our natural desire for health and the survival of our beautiful planet. So we are in this moment where there's a real strong misalignment, because as I say, I have this graphic in the book, as you noted,
yes.
where I say that...
Explain the graphics.
It's a very simple idea, that it comes really from Erich Fromm's idea that this is the frame of lack of goods, not enough stuff for us, so we have to compete to get our stuff, and lack of goodness in us, so lack of goods and goodness. There's not enough of either. There are not enough positive qualities inside us. We're just these selfish little creatures. I think of selfish little shoppers, elbowing each other out in the mall kind of thing.
That's right.
So if you start there, if that is your frame, then I say, then you will believe that you're not able to step up and actually come together in a democratic dialogue and create a future that works for everybody, and you believe that you have to give over your fate to the president, to the CEO, or better yet, to the marketplace, to this infallible law that will sort it all out for us.
Invisible market.
And then what happens is we come up with a very odd idea of a market that is run by one rule, that is highest return to existing wealth. People who already own the shares and run the corporations, and so wealth concentrates and concentrates until it is so concentrated as today that we have what Citigroup has called a plutonomy, basically an economy that's driven by a tiny group at the top. There's one family now, the Waltons, that run Walmart, that own almost as much as 40% of the households in the country, just one family. Okay. So we end up then with such concentration of wealth that we end up creating the conditions that do bring out the worst in us, because we're living in fear, and then we say, see, I told you so. We really are these selfish little critters. And then that spiral of powerlessness, I call it, just intensifies, because we actually, if we believe this about ourselves, turn over our fate to others, that then concentrates wealth and power, brings out the worst in us, because we know concentrated power is one thing for sure that brings out the worst in people, both the powerful and the powerless. And then we say, oh yeah, I told you so, that's what we are. And then it just goes on. So my work, and I think if I can be so bold, I guess is the word, but I mean, I hope it doesn't sound too self-important, but I think that this is the task of everyone alive today, to wake up to the good, the bad, the ugly in us, and to say, look, we know what brings out the ugly. Yeah. We know that concentration of power, we know that anonymity, that being able to shield ourselves, for example, like the bankers and the mortgage brokers who knew, that their slogan was, when they were doing all these fishy lending that got people into such trouble, their slogan was, I'll be gone, you'll be gone. In other words, I'm anonymous, I'll be out of here when all the thing crashes. Yes. So we know that brings out the worst in us, and we know that scapegoating, as in the Holocaust or in any group setting where, it's the bully on the playground where you scapegoat, we know what brings out the worst in us. So we can target those things. And that really, this book, although we've been talking about the problem a lot, this book is stories of solutions. Where are people actually creating the conditions that bring out the best in us? Where are they taking responsibility for actually creating power themselves in their communities? That's what the book is really focused on.
We're going to do it sector by sector. And now, my viewers, this mighty thinker whom you've been listening to is a human frame that literally synthesizes thought, passion, and moral commitment to change the human condition. And now, what I would like to do, for the sake of my curious viewers, is introduce you to how beautifully she writes. My students who have been reading and getting a grip for the second year now, I've used it in 2 of my philosophy courses, describe her work as their living Bible. Consider, for example, this simple and yet profound statement that she makes by way of empowering you and me to do something about the human condition. She says this: this is the question that has propelled my life for decades now. It is really bewildering. We know that no human being actually gets up in the morning vowing, yeah, today I'm going to make sure another child dies